There is a house in Taos, New Mexico that has not had a heating bill in 40 years. The winters there drop to single digits. The wind comes off the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in January with the kind of cold that makes your eyes water before you reach the mailbox. And inside that house, with no furnace running, no propane tank out back, no electric baseboard heaters glowing orange in the corner, the temperature holds steady at 68 degrees from November through March. Not 68 on the warm afternoons, 68 through the night. 68 at 6 in the morning when the outside temperature is 11 degrees and climbing slowly toward the low 20s. The walls do it. Just the walls. Built from a material that costs $4 a square foot and that the people of this region have been using for at least 1,000 years without a single service call, a single filter replacement, or a single utility payment for the heat the building produces. I drove to Taos in February specifically to experience this, rather than just read about it. I wanted to feel what a building does when it is working correctly. A woman named Elena met me at the door. The house was her grandmother's, and her grandmother's grandmother's before that. The walls were Adobe 2 feet thick, the color of the earth they came from. I put my hand flat against the interior surface. It was warm. Not warm the way a wall feels when a heater vent is nearby. Warm the way a stone feels after a full day in the sun, still releasing what it collected hours ago. Not finished yet nowhere close to finished. That quality, that slow, steady release of stored thermal energy, is what Elena's family has been living inside for generations. And it is what the $130 billion HVAC industry has spent decades making sure you never thought to ask for. That feeling is called thermal lag. And it is the most misunderstood, most deliberately ignored, most financially inconvenient principle in the entire history of American residential construction. I have been doing this work long enough to recognize the specific shape of a suppressed idea. It is never banned outright. It is never disproven in the literature. It is just absent from every training manual, every building code incentive structure, and every contractor conversation that happens in this country. Thermal mass construction is that idea, and the people who have been building with it continuously for 1,000 years in one of the most climatically extreme regions of North America have never once needed what the $130 billion HVAC industry is selling. Before I get into this, if finding forgotten knowledge like this means something to you, hit subscribe. I am glad you are here. Now let me show you what Elena's walls are doing. The average American household spends $2,200 a year on heating and cooling combined, according to the Energy Information Administration's 2023 survey. Over 20 years, that is $44,000. A new HVAC system costs between $7,000 and $15,000 to install and needs full replacement every 15 to 20 years. The industry that sells these systems employs 600,000 people, generates $130 billion in annual revenue, and has a straightforward financial relationship with the way American homes are built. American homes are built with 2x4 stud framing and fiberglass insulation. Fiberglass insulation resists the transfer of heat. It slows conduction. What it does not do, what it has never done, is store heat. It is a barrier, not a battery. And a barrier only works as long as the temperature differential across it is being actively maintained by a machine that runs on fuel you pay for every month. An Adobe wall does something categorically different. It does not resist heat. It absorbs it. Slowly, over the course of many hours, it pulls thermal energy in from wherever that energy is available. Sunlight striking the exterior surface, warm air inside the room, the earth beneath the floor. It holds that energy in its thermal mass the way a battery holds electrical charge. And then, as the temperature around it drops, it releases that energy back into the space. Slowly, steadily, over the following hours, the wall becomes the heating system, not a component of the heating system, the system itself. This property is called specific heat capacity. It is a physical constant of every material, measured in joules per kilogram per degree Celsius. Adobe, which is a mixture of clay, sand, and straw or other organic fiber, has a specific heat capacity of approximately 920 joules per kilogram per degree Celsius. Fiberglass insulation has a specific heat capacity of approximately 840 joules per kilogram per degree Celsius. The numbers are close. The difference is not in specific heat capacity. The difference is in density. Adobe weighs approximately 1,700 kilograms per cubic meter. Fiberglass insulation weighs approximately 16 kilograms per cubic meter, 100 times denser. That density is what creates thermal mass. You need mass to store heat the way you need water to fill a reservoir. Fiberglass is a net that slows the water down. Adobe is the reservoir itself. A 2-foot Adobe wall in Taos absorbs solar heat to its exterior surface beginning in the morning. The heat moves through the wall slowly, at a rate determined by the material's thermal diffusivity, taking approximately 8 to 12 hours to reach the interior surface. By the time the sun goes down and the exterior temperature drops below freezing, the interior surface of the wall is just reaching its peak temperature. It radiates that stored heat into the room through the cold night hours. By morning, when the sun rises and begins the cycle again, the wall has given what it stored and is ready to receive again. The house does not heat and cool with the weather. It runs 12 hours behind it. And 12 hours behind is exactly right, because the coldest part of the night aligns with the warmest part of the wall's release cycle. Engineers call this thermal lag. Pueblo builders called it home. The physics have been confirmed extensively in modern research. A 2018 study published in the journal Energy and Buildings measured thermal performance across 5 Adobe structures and 5 equivalent frame construction structures in the American Southwest, under identical weather conditions over a full winter season. The Adobe structures maintained interior temperatures within a range of 8 degrees Fahrenheit across a 24-hour cycle. The frame structures fluctuated by 23 degrees across the same period without active heating. With active heating running continuously, the frame structures consumed an average of 47% more energy than the Adobe structures to maintain the same interior setpoint temperature. 47% more energy. Every month, every year, for the life of the building. The study noted that the Adobe structures in the sample ranged from 80 to over 400 years old. Their thermal performance had not degraded. Adobe does not compress, does not settle into gaps, does not absorb moisture and lose R value the way fiberglass does over time. The performance documented in year 1 is the performance you get in year 100. The American building industry has known this since at least the 1970s, when the first serious comparative energy studies were conducted during the oil crisis. The knowledge did not change what got built. What got built continued to be determined by what was fast, what was cheap to construct in the short term, and what required the most ongoing energy expenditure to maintain. A house that needs no heating system is a house that never generates a service call, never needs a replacement unit, never adds to the $130 billion revenue stream. That is not a conspiracy. That is how an industry protects its market. Now let me tell you about the specific techniques Elena's family uses and what they cost to replicate. The foundation of the system is the wall mass itself. Elena's walls are 2 feet thick. For new construction, that is straightforward. For an existing home, it presents a different kind of opportunity. Interior thermal mass can be added to any room without touching the exterior wall structure, and the performance gains, while not equivalent to full Adobe construction, are significant and measurable. The technique is called a thermal mass interior panel. You build a non-structural interior wall, 3 to 4 inches thick, from Adobe brick or rammed earth block, set 2 to 4 inches away from the existing exterior wall. The gap between the new thermal mass panel and the old exterior wall creates an air channel that serves 2 purposes. It allows the thermal mass to interact with the interior room air on both faces, doubling its effective surface area for heat exchange. And it prevents moisture bridging between the exterior wall and the interior space. The thermal mass panel is not load-bearing. It does not require a foundation engineer or a structural permit in most jurisdictions. It is, for building code purposes, essentially a heavy decorative wall. Adobe brick costs between $1.50 and $3 per brick depending on your region and whether you purchase commercial brick or make your own from site soil. A standard Adobe brick is 10 inches by 4 inches by 14 inches and weighs approximately 30 pounds. You need approximately 7 bricks per square foot of wall at a 4-inch thickness. A 12 by 8 foot interior panel, which is a meaningful thermal mass addition to a standard bedroom or living room, requires roughly 670 bricks and costs between $1,000 and $2,000 in materials. The installation requires no specialized tools or skills beyond basic masonry. A standard mortar mix or a clay slip mortar, which is the traditional method and requires no purchased materials if you have clay soil, bonds the bricks into a stable panel that will outlast the house it sits in. You can also make your own Adobe brick from site soil if your soil has adequate clay content, which roughly 70% of residential properties in the continental United States do. The test is simple. Take a handful of moist soil and roll it between your palms into a ribbon. If the ribbon holds together for 2 inches or more before breaking, your soil has enough clay to make functional Adobe brick without any purchased amendment. Mix the soil with a small amount of straw or dried grass fiber, roughly 1 part fiber to 10 parts soil by volume. Add water until you reach a consistency slightly stiffer than peanut butter. Press it into wooden forms, 12 inches by 4 inches by 6 inches, and dry it in the sun for 2 to 3 weeks. Turn the bricks once during drying to ensure even moisture loss from both faces. The straw fiber prevents cracking during drying by bridging the shrinkage stress that occurs as moisture leaves the brick. This is the same technology, exactly the same, that has produced structurally sound buildings throughout the American Southwest for over 1,000 years. The bricks Elena's grandmother used in her house were made this way. Some of them may still be in the original walls. None of them have failed. The total cost of a DIY thermal mass panel using site-made Adobe brick is the cost of wooden form lumber, approximately $40 to $80 for a set of reusable forms that will produce several hundred bricks. And your time. The clay slip mortar that bonds the bricks requires nothing beyond the same site clay and water. No purchased mortar. No Portland cement. No trip to the hardware store. The thermal performance payback on a $500 total material cost panel in a room that currently requires active heating is typically measured in 1 to 2 heating seasons depending on your climate and current energy costs. After that, it is free, every year. For as long as the wall stands, there is a second layer to Elena's system that compounds the thermal mass performance significantly. South-facing windows. The Pueblo builders oriented their structures to maximize solar gain through openings on the south face of the building, while minimizing openings on the north, east, and west faces, where heat loss exceeds solar gain for most of the heating season. A south-facing window in the American Southwest, and across most of the continental United States at latitudes above 35 degrees, receives direct sunlight for the majority of the winter day. That sunlight strikes the thermal mass wall opposite the window and begins the charging cycle. The window is the solar collector. The wall is the battery. The room is what benefits. This principle is called passive solar design, and it has been validated in thousands of modern studies. The Department of Energy's own passive solar design guide, available free on their website, documents average heating cost reductions of 50 to 70% in homes designed with south-facing glazing and interior thermal mass. 50 to 70% from orientation and material choices that cost nothing beyond the decision to use them. The Pueblo builders made that decision 1,000 years ago. American residential construction made the opposite decision and built an industry around the consequences. Adding south-facing window area to an existing home costs between $800 and $2,000 per window, depending on size and installation complexity. Pairing that window addition with an interior thermal mass panel on the north wall of the same room creates the complete passive solar thermal mass system in a space that previously required active heating to maintain comfort. The total investment for one well-oriented room runs between $1,500 and $3,500, depending on your approach and your climate. The ongoing operating cost for that room from that point forward is zero. Not reduced, not offset. Zero. The sun charges the wall heats the room. The cycle repeats for as long as the wall stands, which, as Elena's house demonstrates, is at least 100 years and probably several hundred more. Elena walked me through every room in that house. Each one had a slightly different character, a different angle of light, a different texture of wall surface, but every room held the same temperature. The walls were doing what they had always done, what they were built to do, what no amount of ductwork and refrigerant and quarterly service agreements had ever managed to replicate as cleanly or as permanently. They were holding the heat of the day and giving it back through the night. They were doing it without a thermostat, without a filter change, without a utility bill. I drove home through the high desert with the heater in my truck running and thought about how many homes in this country are built from materials chosen for construction speed rather than thermal performance. How many heating bills are paid every January by people who live in climates where the sun shines 280 days a year and whose south walls are sided in vinyl over fiberglass, over an air gap that does nothing but slow the inevitable. The solution is not complicated. It is not expensive relative to the cost it replaces. It is not new. It is 1,000 years old, and it is sitting in plain sight in Taos, New Mexico, holding steady at 68 degrees, while the Sangre de Cristo wind pushes against the outside of walls that have already decided not to let it in. You know now how those walls work, and you know what to do about the ones you live inside. If this resonated with you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This knowledge belongs to all of us.